And good evening, everyone. Eek, 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 says the Ospreys. And that means it's time for McDuff underscore 2020. Welcome to our channel here. And we are just about to get started with another exciting issue of the Thursday Night Trio with George Webb and Professor Hamamoto. And well, let me before I get started say thanks for the super chat to Tyrone. And Tyrone, it's nice of you, very nice of you. Yeah, YouTube gets a chunk, but I think it's kind of cool that you do that. It puts the color up there, and it's nice. So I definitely appreciate the super chat. And without further ado, let's bring up our usual suspects. On the far right, with his coat on and in his warm hat, Professor Daryl Hamamoto. Good evening, Daryl. And right in the middle, where he should be, Big George Webb, investigative journalist, and the guy that really is leading the charge here on so many ways. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us again tonight for another Thursday trio. So let's open it up. I think last time we were together, I asked Professor to start. So tonight maybe we'll ask George Webb to start off the proceedings. And George, what you got?
Well, I think everyone is thinking the same thing. It's amazing how the alternative media centers us all in on the same things. The big right now is the SCOTUS lawsuit, the Supreme Court lawsuit that Trump says is the big one.
It's the big one. It sounds like Sanford and Sons. This is the big one. Well, I hope it does something. George, I'm not hearing your voice for some reason. Uh-oh. George is frozen.
Frozen a little bit.
Professor, I'm going to let you take over while we see if we can get George back.
Well, I know you're taking a holiday on Christmas Eve, so I'm going to try to fill that vacuum, difficult as is. And I'll be talking about the Lego fascist world. It's the biggest selling toy in the world. You know, I'm toy-oriented. We talked about the Super Soaker when we talk about aerosolized vectors. We talked about the ant farm. We talked about those crazy shrimp, right? And all that. So these toys are really representations of societies.
Move it over right in front of your face, because otherwise we can't see it.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about what I call Lego fascism. And the toys Lego?
Lego fascism?
Yeah, Lego fascism. Lego global fascism. It's about recombinant DNA, combinatorial politics, virtual politics. It's a whole ontology, let's call it, of the new oppression. That's the reset oppression that Klaus Schwab is now officially announcing. And it all comes from a seemingly benign Danish company called Lego. And they're involved in management. They're involved in training, teacher training, education. They're training new legions of scientists, technologists, engineers. And it all comes from this little 8-pronged toy. And of course, it's a transmedia franchise. They have several Lego movies. They're in superheroes, Batman, Lego, all of it. And what I would like to do is to have some adult friends of Lego, as well as children, talk about it and discuss their own play world of Lego to get some kind of anthropological, ethnological research from the users of this. And in doing so, they're going to have some sort of awareness of what they have bought into. So anyway, that's for Christmas Eve.
Okay, so if we can open that one toy early and play with our Lego. I should go get our Lego rocket. I'll show you just a second.
Please. And I have one request for John to come back. George, are you still with us? Oh, there you go. Was that designed by Werner von Braun?
The very one. This is a Saturn V.
Saturn, oh yeah.
This is Saturn V, the one that took the the astronauts up to the moon. And
Oh,
yeah, even though it was made in China, it does say United States on it. It has a
okay.
U.S. flag and everything. So,
All right.
what could go wrong? Anyway, this was our project for the beach, and it was like 700 or 800 pieces when we started. So
So you,
I enjoyed it. I really did.
you get into a flow state, a flow experience, altered state of consciousness, and that's why it's so insidious of a toy. But I think you're helping to prove the approach that I'm taking here. It's very seductive, and therein lies the thread, I imagine. But John, I had a personal appeal I wanted to make to you. You as an amateur astronomer, right? You know that on the 21st, for the first time in 600 years, we're going to see the conjunction of the moon and the planets, right? So you have another show next week. I wonder if you could just briefly give us, your audience, your thoughts as an amateur astronomer about the implications of this conjunction, this astronomical phenomenon.
All right, I'll take a shot at that. Hey, George is back. Okay. Well,
Hey,
George, you're back just in time to hear my my astronomical astrological projections here for the professor and everyone. So on December 21st, of course, that is the beginning of official winter. It is the shortest day, the longest night. And it is a time when traditionally all peoples have observed something. For instance, the Scottish people have this tradition called the Hogmanay, in which they would have the fire going, and on the evening of that, before that evening, they have a fire, and at night they let the coals burn down. But they keep a certain, they keep some coals hot, and these hot coals are the basis of the next fire, so that the next day they'll get up and they'll go out and start a fire for the new year, because it really is the beginning of a new season of life, and even though we have to live through the cold months. Now, December 21st, 22nd is also when this time we have the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. As you said, for the first time in like 600 years, they're being so close. I'll tell you how close they're going to be. If you can picture the moon in the sky, they're going to be closer together than so that they would both fit within the disk of the moon. They're going to be that close to each other. It's really a remarkable thing. Now, if you want to see it, you should start practicing now by every clear evening, look in the dusk sky and over toward where the sun sets, and you'll see these two bright objects, one much brighter than the other. The bright one is Jupiter, the less bright one is Saturn. And start observing them. Start observing them right now, because you can see each night they're going to get closer. It's pretty exciting. Now, of course, it being Christmas season, a lot of people are associating this event with what some people have speculated was the Star of Bethlehem, in that astronomers have gone back into the records, and they can go back and, with the computers now, look at the sky as it was on the 1st of January of the year 1 or 0, whichever it is, and they can look at it and say, okay, well, at that time there were these three bright stars were very close to each other. Maybe that's what the Christian writers were recording as a star. It was really a conjunction of more than one star, and that's why it was so extraordinary. I don't tend to buy that. I think people can tell when it's one star and when it's two or three. It's not difficult. They're not that close together. So as far as real astrology, you've got death, Saturn, the grandfather, and then you've got the king of the gods, Jupiter, and together these are very, very powerful. And so I think it's also interesting as we study the Pilgrim Society to remember that the Pilgrims landed exactly 400 years ago.
Wow.
December 22nd, 1620. So that's another layer of interest that we have, and particularly if you have ancestors on the Mayflower, this may be significant to you. But also, if you're part of the British intelligence that does things sometimes based on occult calculations, that this might be something that they're thinking about, saying, "Hey, we've had 400 years of slavery. We celebrated or observed that last year, 1619." Now we've got 400 years of pilgrims, and you know what? Enough is enough. Let's put our foot down and come in and take over and show the world the way that it's really supposed to be run by really proper, smart people like us in the Pilgrim Society. So there's a quick dump of what comes up in my mind when you ask me the significance of December 21st, 22nd this year. And I see George is listening and drinking it in. What do you have to say, George?
Well, you've conjured up images of Imran Awan shoving optical ballots through the scanner for me. That just comes up Imran Awan and the DNC with Dominion machines. I don't know why Saturn meeting Jupiter conjures that image, but I see Debbie Wasserman Schultz with a very large bag of ballots trying to get her sleigh into the various counties that are going to flip the election.
So it's not anything mystical for you, George. It's all about Imran Awan and the big story of your research, and the culmination is all actually coming together about then, because by then I think the electoral college probably will have voted, unless the Supreme Court does something really extraordinary. Anyway, that's what I got.
Saturn is the black sun. Saturn is known as the black sun. And then on it's an object of veneration going back to the early Teutonic tribes, going into the Third Reich philosophy. So my question to George Webb is that going to be the occasion, the conjunction of the planets, the black sun in particular? Is that going to portend or signal really the big one?
The big one meaning the big spray,
the big reset. Klaus Schwab is telling us about this reset, right? So maybe it's the reset of the black sun.
Yeah, I do think I do have that feeling that the big spray is coming, and spraying is really great because unlike bullets, you have to be really accurate. Spraying is willy-nilly. You could just cover huge spots. This is why in Vietnam they love the bioweapons so much. It's just a spray. And all your assets, all your military aircraft can be used for the spray. Now they can target people who don't have the vaccine and they're goners, right? And then you have your own people who have the vaccine. To me, every great reset should be preceded by a huge spray, an insecticidal spraying campaign. And if you think about it, Monsanto has been, with all these paperclip Nazis, they've really been working on this ever since the end of the World War II.
Yeah.
And this is their big moment in the sun, or in the black sun, as it were. So I agree with you that if there was a time for a great Nazi Teutonic knights out dancing in the moonlight, this would be it.
Speaking of which,
a Walpurgis night for the for the Hitler types, and yeah, it could be. Professor, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, toward that, and I want to ask George about this autobiography that I've been reading. I've read the first few chapters, and also the epilogue by Max Boot, B-O-O-T, who wrote it independently. And as most of you know, Max Boot is sort of the secretary of the New World Order, the military division of it. He's a journalist who's very rah-rah about it. But I was inspired to get this book by George's comments about the quote-unquote enterprise. And what I found, there's no index in this book, but Aaron Prince is very close to J. Topher Black, who goes back to the days of the Vietnam War, where they're workshopping what was then called irregular warfare, which failed militarily, but politically, ever since then, they've been practicing irregular warfare on everybody in the world, including the American people, we're finding out. So, George, I wonder if you can help us contextualize his book, Civilian Warriors. And strangely enough, he has the audacity to point to Cristoforo Colombo, or Cristobal Colon, Christopher Columbus, as the first private military contractor. And he said the American Republic was built on the Marquis de Lafayette and all these other PMCs. So he thinks he's part of that historical trajectory. Please comment.
Well, there's the whole crew in there that testified in front of Congress to get Blackwater all their big payouts, for the Iraq reconstruction. And we went from a situation where there was, I think it was 3 or 4 soldiers per contractor at the beginning of the Iraq War to 10 contractors per soldier by the end of the Iraq War. And that's the kind of swing we had during the Eric Prince money gold rush that Blackwater had. I've been to the academy. I've walked onto their area there illegally. And so in North Carolina, right on the border there of Virginia. And their idea is, hey, we can control the politics. We have the insider connections. We can get the money. We can release the sluice gate of all this money. We know how to spray. We know how to laser scope people. It should be our stuff, man. It's might makes right. You mentioned earlier before the show that tantalum, rare earth metals. It's a bonanza right now in Africa. Tantalum allows high capacity resistors that don't overheat for iPhones and so forth. Cobalt has got its uses, all these, rare earth metals. That's what Eric Prince is doing right now. And his, when all these guys write their like self-absorbed, it's almost like they're daubing themselves with incense. It's grotesque on a grandiose scale that you just can't imagine. But what I love about it when they're sunning themselves and they're basking in their own glory is they do give us metadata. They give us metadata that does unwind the conspiracy. And this is going to be the answer to the test. It's this, like you said, private contractors. We had, Schmitz, Joseph Schmitz, who was a plant in the Trump campaign, the foreign policy team, waxing poetically about von Steuben as the first contractor and wanting to actually change the seal of the DOD to include von Steuben. And over there in Lafayette Square, you've also got Kosciuszko, I think, is one of the guys, the Polish guy, and then you've got Lafayette over in the other corner. And these guys would sub out everything. It would all just be a trust fund given to Eric Prince, and then there would be one employee that would just forward the money, and that's no public service. Everything is mercenary. It's all for us. If people get in the way, that's collateral damage. Let's move on. Yet another domino in our topples. Thank you very much. And that's the story, of the last 20 years with Eric Prince, with Blackwater.
Well, one piece of autobiographical metadata which never occurred to me, because I assumed Prince was an anglicized version of maybe Prinz, like German, but actually the family goes back to the Low Country, to Holland. So I'm thinking they're going back, because they were the original Western European predators of the rest of the world, right, with the East India Company and all that. The incredible capital flowed into these beautiful city centers that amassed that wealth of the show. So I think if we dig a little bit deeper, because his father was supposedly a self-made man out of Detroit, by the way, servicing the auto business and whatnot, and that's how he became a so-called self-made man. But in listening to people like Mark Kulak and John, most of these self-made men are the scions of some earlier family dynasty that had been set up, like Jeff Bezos and so on, and Bill Gates. So I'm thinking that the Prince legacy, if you want to go with the original spelling of their family name, probably the heraldry would go back to the Low Country, and they are, because we talk about Strauss and we talked about the Maltese connection and all these different ethnic, religio-political dynasties that have migrated into the U.S. and are still waging war amongst themselves in almost feudalistic medieval terms. And so maybe this is what they're trying to get us back into, a neo-feudal situation where they're the overlords and where we again are reduced to the peasantry.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. Above the mantle, above the wooden shoes where you put them by the side door when you come in at the Prince household, there's the saying, if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much, over there in Grand Rapids. And the father, of course, had Prince machinery, which was a very poor, thinly veiled show front for weapons and weapons manufacturing for covert actions all over the world, especially Africa, especially the Middle East. So his father was way involved in this with Gerald Ford way before Eric Prince ever got involved. As a matter of fact, Peter Duke has been to Eric Prince's house many times. And these guys, they fancy themselves after they, Eric Prince bought a whole fleet of small airplanes, and he outfitted them with sprayers, and he outfitted them with small machine guns, and he could robotically fly them to guard these green zones of commerce with gas and oil pipelines and trade routes for uranium and stuff like that. But then they have this kind of grandiose kind of like self-absorption where they go, hey, you know what? I should be in politics too. I'm kind of wonderful. I want to, dance down into onto Capitol Hill and testify in front of Congress and be the fair-haired boy that pulls down all these additional zillions. And we can't see these as latter-day Ollie Norths. We can't somehow go, hey, you know what? You look like Ollie North in here. Again, pushing drugs for weapons, drugs for weapons, drugs for weapons. Here you're mopping the floor with drugs for weapons. Get out, right? We don't do that. We do the opposite. We make them heroes. And we somehow see their little chests full of medals and we say, oh, they're heroes. And they're not. They're drug runners. They're weapons runners. They're rat lines guys. And we have to call them out for what they are. And no one has bilked the U.S. Congress more for private mercenary dollars than Eric Prince. He's the all-time champion. He's the Muhammad Ali of bilking the U.S. government for mercenary dollars.
Well, it sounds like a neat idea to me, George, Mr. Neat Idea, because, Ollie North has got to be a contender there. And, of course, Richard Armitage, I would say that he's in the running, too. But, my goodness, that's the pattern, and it just keeps going on and on. Hey, let me toss something in here, if I may. I've spent a good part of today studying the Schiller Institute's writings, and they've done a tremendous amount of work, which I recommend people check out at schillerinstitute.com, on what they're calling the New Silk Road. And the New Silk Road for them is a good thing, a great idea. It's something they've been pushing, since LaRouche's got started 30, 40 years ago. The idea being that it really is one world. And if you can maintain the sovereignty of different nations and have each nation respect the sovereignty of other nations, in other words, the Peace of Westphalia from 1648 redone, saying we're all going to go back to that and we're not going to be putting spies in each other's countries anymore. Yay for that, get rid of the CIA in terms of spying and start dealing with everybody honestly. Also, to engage in helping, like President Kennedy said in his inaugural address, to help the underdeveloped world to develop. And by so doing, we'll enrich ourselves by providing the material and creating the infrastructure and then selling it to them. They will then be able to stand on their own 2 feet, as was the promise of World War II, that it was going to be the end of colonialism, something that the British immediately stomped on and reversed. But with that type of a positive Belt and Road vision, contrasting that with what we've seen going on, which I think Mark has done a fantastic job over at Housatonic Live to show us that the investments from Warren Buffett in particular are going into a kind of a competitive version of this positive Silk Road and turning it into a profit center for the same elites that have been profiting off of everything. And this is where I think, George, you've been talking about, well, what this is going to be. It's going to be the greatest drug corridor that the world has seen yet. And so I think we have an opportunity to look at this as kind of what I've now learned. People talk about something called a K-shaped recovery. The letter K, of course, having two spikes on the right end. One goes up and the other goes down. And those two spikes indicate where our recovery is going. That is, the elites are going to get richer and the rest of us are going to get poorer. Well, to take that as a view and to say, are we really going to let this division between those ones that already have their money and have signed up for the program and are participating in the depopulation programs that are going on right now, are we going to let them control this incredible asset, or are we going to take charge of it by going in and saying, we want to work with China, we want to work with Russia, we want to work with Africa, we want to work with all of these developing countries, and to finally fulfill the promise that President Kennedy had made on his inaugural day so many years ago. That's my contribution for whatever you all think, but I think this really is in terms of the one world order. Well, we don't want a one world order, but we do have to recognize that the world is getting smaller, and this Belt and Road or New Silk Road or whatever you want to call it is coming. So it's a question of whether we manage it for the benefit of humankind, or are we going to let them manage it and then be more of the same of them culling all those people that they don't really want to have to share the planet with anyway.
George.
Well.
Brilliant. No.
Yeah. Well, I agree with a lot of those things, John, with the Treaty of Westphalia and self-determination and, all rights and all peoples to their own resources and all this sort of thing. I wrote a book earlier this year that talked about Warren Buffett being involved in a big Russia-China energy deal, and turned out to be correct when the Bobulinski blackberries were foisted upon the world right before the election. This is what we have, evidence. No rhetoric here. We saw that Hunter Biden's running around the chairman of CEFC, which is this China energy corridor. We've seen him, with Hunter Biden in Kazakhstan getting uranium out of the uranium bank for Warren Buffett. We've seen him running around in all these different places in Europe and along the Belt and Road, making these deals on encrypted devices. It doesn't appear very inclusive to me. It seems like everything's encrypted. It's shadowy. It's in a nether world, not for you and me, but for Warren Buffett. And the poor Hunter Biden has just kind of been reduced to a courier. And the other silent partner here, John, and CEFC is Rothschild Energy. Rothschild Energy is all over this thing. And so when I hear that, I see the K curve that you're talking about. The K curve doesn't care about the Kissinger curve, doesn't care about Uzbekis or Kyrgyzstanis or any of the Stanis. They care about profits, and it's the British, like you mentioned, the Dutch East India Company or the British East India Company writ larger than it's ever been. So I don't see anything positive about that unless you break the network. If you break the network and you see the kind of machinations that have gone on, and you see the kind of undercurrents and how this world money is moved around, then I think people can have a fair shake and say, wait a minute, you got to deal us into this. But while this is all encrypted, while this is all a conclave enclave, that we can't participate in, we can't see. It's opaque to us. I don't have much. I'm pessimistic, I guess.
Well, I'm going to be talking to Harley Schlanger soon, first thing next week, and I want to ask him about what your objections and of course also. I mean, there's two big questions for me. Number one, who's going to run the money system? Whose currency are we going to be using in the future? Is it going to be a one world currency? I hope it's not going to be some digital thing like Bitcoin and all, because that would really just suck all the energy out of the sovereignty of this country by making our currency not tied to our nationality anymore. And but somehow the money's going to be run. And then again, the other big question is, who's going to run the opium? Are they going to legitimize it all and turn it all into drugstores, or who's going to run it? Who's going to be making the money? Because all of that, of course, is what's driving these private contractors and mercenaries in the first place, is because there's just so much money in the drug trade, as we've discussed so many times, George and Darrell. So those are my two biggest concerns, on top of what George has just said about the fact that this is all going on behind the scenes. It's opaque, and the deals are being made without our participation in any way. The Congress is just letting it happen. And so, gosh, I mean, we feel kind of helpless. On the other hand, things aren't looking that bad, are they? We have made quite a dent in their case. And even if Trump is not reelected, which, God forbid, but if he's not reelected, there's going to be a huge payback on the impeachment front, because Biden is going to be very, very impeachable, and that's going to be the drumbeat for the first 6 months, I'm sure, is the payback of, look what you did to our guy. We're gonna get you back now. And although the House is controlled by the Democrats, if the Senate stays Republican, the Senate doesn't have the power to charge the impeachment, but the Senate does have the power to create an investigative committee. The Judiciary Committee would be the proper venue, and then to use that as a forum, as a public scolding place to investigate aggressively what really we can see is not just a Hunter Biden problem, but a Biden family problem that goes back a long way. And as this prosecution of Hunter Biden unfolds, the prosecution of Joe Biden should probably follow willy-nilly, unless, of course, we end up with a corrupt Attorney General's office. But nevertheless, I think that the Senate could do a terrific job of destroying the credibility of an incoming Biden administration with no holds barred, because that's the way they treated Trump. So I think what I'm saying is that the work that you've done, George, and everyone else has done, will not be in vain, that it will be, these 74 million or 80 million people are still here. And it's a very motivated crowd, the Trump crowd. The idea that Biden could successfully pull off a presidency, even if he is given the election by the powers that be, and he swears in on July the 20th, I don't think his presidency could possibly be successful. And that's another reason why I think that, the Democrats are kind of painted themselves into a corner with this really elderly man that's kind of he can't even walk his dog, as Terrence Williams pointed out today. How could he possibly run the country? So anyway, there's a little bit of hope there that is generated because of all the tremendous work that has been done to try to prevent a Biden presidency. I'm trying to look at the bright side, George. I see you smiling.
Well, I want to hear Dr. Hamamoto's take. I've gone 2 times in a row.
Go ahead, Doc.
I tend to agree with George from the standpoint that this level of corruption, structural corruption in these families that seem to be dominating the scene generationally, there's a ratchet effect. That is, once it's up to that level, it's nearly impossible to ever ratchet it back, to turn it back whether it's to the Treaty of Westphalia or even to the warning that President Eisenhower gave us as he was resigning. However, I do have a bit of good news in that out of the crisis created by the mass vaccination threats by people like Klaus Schwab, that organically this is an international phenomenon, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm not an expert on it. You'll have to have someone like Lena Boo talk to you about it. But from what I'm learning is that the crisis that was put into play because of this mass vaccination has gotten a lot of people all over the world mobilized, and they're already in the process of filing notices of liability to people like Elon Musk personally, to people like the head of the FCC, Ajit Pai, for the 5G in the area of the vaccines. The Center for Disease Control has been filed. Notices of liability have been filed to all the principals who head these organizations, and same with the Federal Drug Administration. And many of you do not know, and Lena was the one that told me about this, but as I think it was Bill Gates himself provided a data point. He said the CDC is the gold standard, right? And he was right, because the rest of the entities around the world take their orders from the American CDC. So these counter contractual notices of liability have already been served, and they'll be continued to be served. Now, John, you as a trained attorney, you might have a different perspective on the efficacy of this attempt, but I'm looking at as a grassroots groundswell opportunity to reclaim our heritage, our common law heritage, even natural law heritage, because that's what I think it's really going to require. That will be our reset, humanity's reset, and we're going to claim that. So that's a notice of liability movement.
I'm not against that. I hope that it works. I'm not expressing any legal opinions about it, but the idea that citizens would post the notice in the first place has an effect on a politician. The one thing that politicians do react to is large numbers of people. And so I wish you success with that campaign. That business about what's going on around the world, well, I encourage people to check it out. The German lawyer Rainer Fühlmich is very prominent on YouTube. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, but what he says is that because the PCR test does not actually identify the COVID virus, but wasn't geared to do it and doesn't actually do that, the whole lockdown has been a fraud, and it's been a fraud upon the people of Europe, and he's intending to pursue that in German court and in the world court, I think. So that kind of thing is happening. On the other hand, nothing is stopping the rollout of the vaccine, and this mRNA-based injection you're going to get, which they're calling a vaccine. I don't know of any vaccines that work like that before. I mean, most vaccines they isolate the disease. They put some of it in the smallpox in your arm, and then you get the antibodies. And when you're exposed to smallpox, you don't get sick because you got the antibodies. That's the way that's supposed to work. This thing is completely different. And because they don't have to test it for so long, and they can create it supposedly, almost with computers, they can create this thing. And so there's nothing stopping it. And I feel for the people of Europe, because, Europe, we have two advantages over Europe. Number one, we at least have a sizable number of people that like you guys and me and everybody in the chat room and all the great fellow researchers and reaching out all over the place from SGT report to thousands and thousands of people on different social webs and everything. we have that. And also what we have that they don't have is we have a whole lot of guns, and they don't have any. So from us over here, we have some power. But over in Europe, they don't have any power. They do not understand, that the situation as we see it. They're basically glued to Sky News, Rupert Murdoch, BBC, and what else? I mean, it's really pretty bad over there. When I try to talk to my European friends, I find it's worse than trying to talk to my American liberal friends, because at least the Americans know that there's a whole lot of people that really sincerely voted for Trump. Whereas in Europe, they'll just, if you tell them you vote for Trump, they will laugh at you. They will call you every name in the book and treat you like a fool for the rest of your encounters. So I feel very, very sad about Europe. I love Europe, but they have they've been taken down in a way that hasn't happened here yet, and hopefully that it never will.
Well, John, I in these complicated times with lots of moving parts going on, I always look back to the great example of your father, who was in this maelstrom, a similar maelstrom. And, you can imagine the swirl in the Kennedy White House. And, somehow he survives that. And I understand Kennedy, completely overwhelmed with all these CIA coming at him from every different direction. But I do like the idea of working from integrity and working from a values-based ethic. That is the empowering thing that takes you through the greatest darkness. And I know that's a little allegorical, but that's kind of what we need right now. We kind of need to summon that courage, say, hey, we got to be that shining light right now, and we have to put light on these dark networks that are doing these dark machinations, and we have to be that kind of force in the world. That's what our researchers do, John, on a daily basis. That's people who contribute to Mark Kulak's channel, your channel, Harry the Greek, my channel, all the different people who are researching. And I don't know what the final answer is going to be. I don't know what the final stroke of the big, runting, sword is going to be that gives us light, where there was darkness. But I do know that if we keep swinging, we got a better chance of winning than if we just take it and get sprayed. So I didn't mean to be so reductio about this, but I do tend to fall back on heroes in these situations that are polemic, and I really think that his network, the network he was working on, this dark seed, this dark thread, this rogue element that ran through this is the root of the network, is the root of the weed. And if we can get that taproot out, we can actually unseat this thing. I think everything else we're just swatting at the leaves on the trees, and with the Eric Princes of the world, all this stuff comes out of being able to get money.
I'll be done in 10 minutes. Yeah, I'm in a live cast. Yeah, I'm a customer here.
They're rousting him out. They.
Security. So
security.
Done in a few minutes.
Okay. I'm sorry, Doctor. I'll let you.
It's okay.
Why don't you you have a shot here, Doctor? I'll let you finish up.
No. I can't. I can't help but understand that Saxa was instrumental. I read this book about McVie-Sog's Special Observation Group in Vietnam, and there's only 2 pages about Saxa, and that's really why I read it. I don't know if John has that. I can scan it. But I think there needs to be historical research on Saxa. Yeah, that's the one. That's exactly the one. It's about 2 pages, 3 pages, something like that.
Yeah.
Now, following along George's statement, if there was an entire book devoted to Saxa, I think that would give people the inspiration and the understanding that there are people out there like that who are on our side and are willing to die and fight to uncover corruption at the highest levels, as it turns out. But as it is in that particular book, it's only kind of mentioned in passing, and it's not really seen as being a major force. Now, what I'm getting from John and through George is that Saxa is really at the center of it. It's not peripheral; it's at the center of it. Now, I know it was part of an operation that was kind of in the gray area between military and civilian. But from what I've learned through John's experience via his father's spirit as well, is that might really be the historical touchstone that we need to understand fully, so that we can retake the American Republic and return it to the American people. I'm an academic, so I'm prejudiced, but I think that the knowledge of the past and the wisdom of history will out. That's, we're learning from the Peloponnesian Wars, and we're reading all this material, even till this day. Even someone like Eric Prince says he was a history buff. Strangely enough, that's what caused him to go along his particular course. So I think if we do maintain this research effort, bringing in any number of perspectives, if we dive deeply in areas that people are only have glanced on, like this book right here, and talk about specifically Saxa, I think we have a really good chance. I really do. I'm that committed to the research component of this struggle.
Well, anybody that hasn't run into TDY yet, I highly recommend that you read the book TDY by Doug Valentine, because if you're looking for a hero that stands up against the CIA and their drug running, that's the book. And the sole opportunity that happened right there in '67, and I can look right on this page that you referred me to here in the book and tell you that at that time there was a gap between the Saxes, between Piers and Dupuy. So William Ray Piers, Major General Piers, was the Saxa from 66 to 67, January. Then Major General William Bill Dupuy was the Saxa from March 67 to 69. So there's no Saxa in February. There's a month or two gap where there's nobody running the shop. And it's that time which we think was when my dad, who was the head of counterinsurgency planning, either took it on himself or through working with people like Hoover or maybe some of the good guys from the old military days like MacArthur and people like that. But anyway, he was the guy that put together this amazing task force to go into Laos to try to photograph, videotape, and bust this very high-level CIA guy that was doing business with the Vang Pao opium business. So that story does give you the basis on which you can say, hey, there are heroes that will fight against this thing. And, my dad was one of them.
Absolutely.
John, let me just add to that, because this is where I put in Colby, because Colby was so involved in Vietnam, and he was a Jedburgh OSS guy jumping out of planes, and then he ended up kind of being developing the communist, the anti-communist network with Gladio in Rome. His wife was going to the church every day. They were living near Vatican City. They were just Catholics on kind of like a stick high, and they tried to transplant that to Vietnam to run that same kind of counterinsurgency in Vietnam. And I think all the things that Colby had hoped for, which was sort of this righteous warrior type of thing, gave way to this drug stuff. I think Colby was just as cold-blooded a killer, as far as special forces is concerned. I mean, he launched 1,000 ships to do that, but he had a real moral issue, I believe, and I know I'd like to talk to Doug Valentine more about this, but he had a moral issue with all this drug running. And, otherwise I just can't see Colby giving Doug all that information, about 200 different interviews. He let Doug interview 200 different people, 200 different CIA agents to sort of lift the veil on this thing. Yeah. And I think when it's all said and done, you're going to see some kind of cooperation between Colby. Again, just metadata analysis. I don't have any documents, but you're going to see some kind of cooperation between Colby, who wanted to see the drug running attenuated, and people like your father in the Saxa group that could actually do something about it. Run a covert operation in the background to catch these guys in the act, and then bring that evidence to the American people. And I'll just add one thing. Look at Colby's testimony in 75.
Yeah, the church.
Yeah, in front of the church committee, which was, I don't know how many times he testified that year, 13 times, 14 times. But it was all about the family jewels and hey, this is all the bad stuff we're doing. And he, toward the last few years of his life, and I know you're sitting right across from where his last paddle strokes occurred, John. He had this huge guilt. He had this need for absolution, in his last years of his life. And I just think that we're going to find, when the historical record's all said and done, we're going to find Colby was trying to do the right thing as absolution in the last years of his life.
Well, I won't argue with you. I love the idea of people turning around. Especially, we also have to mention the visit from John DeCamp talking to Colby about, look, I found this horrible Franklin, what we call the Franklin cover-up, the Franklin scandal. And, that also may have triggered Colby's conscience. You, George, often speak of a good Mossad and a bad Mossad, and there's certainly room for levels of goodness and badness in everybody, and certainly abilities to change. But the bottom line is, what is your philosophy of life? Is your philosophy of life that the humanist philosophy that we're here to be the best people we can, to understand life, to learn constantly, to always be trying to be better people, and to treat each other with respect and dignity, and everybody does their part to get along? Is that what we're here for? And also to have children and to multiply. And why not have a vision of expanding, like Star Trek out into the universe and taking the planets and star systems and everything in the future? That's the positive future we were given as children, that we're going to do that. Now they're telling us, we can go to Mars, but right now, first of all, we've got all of these problems, and then we've got this $20 trillion deficit, and we've got all of these different things we got to work on. And what they're doing is just stalling, giving us the dream, but not giving us any way to actually get there, while they're reducing the population. And that, I think, is the overall theme of what's going on here, is that they don't really want to work hard enough to develop the world for everybody. They just want to reduce the population to a manageable number of people. And then, as a number of people have been recognizing, in order for them to control us, they really do have to take away our powers of reasoning and our appreciation for things like classical art, classical music, reasoning, the idea of learning a language in order to expand your mind. All of that stuff has got to go, and we've got to be turned into people that are just focused on the here and now. And at the end of the day, everything's done, and we wake up the next day, and we just live our lives in the present moment like sheep. And that's what this K curve is headed towards, is that along with the financial resources, the intellectual resources are all going to go up to the elites and down for everyone else. And as much as we can, we have to just let everybody know that this is the plan. And I don't care if you're a liberal or a conservative or a right wing or a left wing or a populist or a progressive or whatever you are, as long as you're not one of these people that's willing, like Ollie North, to participate. And hey, that's a good idea. We can kill two birds with one stone. We can sell drugs and arms, and we can conquer Nicaragua while we're making money off of Iran, and that kind of just a zero-sum game of if we don't have it, if they have it, then that means we didn't get it. So we got to make sure that they don't get it. So we got everything. That zero-sum game is being played right now, and it's being played upon us heavy duty with the pressure that's coming to everybody, to take the injection, to take the shot, whatever's in it. Hey, there's going to be peer pressure, huge peer pressure. Once they get a sizable plurality in every jurisdiction, then that plurality that has already taken the shot is going to look at the rest of us and say, hey, you guys are putting everybody else at risk, and they're going to shame us into taking that shot. I don't like it. I don't like the way they're controlling the media. I don't like the way they're controlling the medicine. I don't like anything about this whole what they've authorized today, right? Emergency authorization for a completely untested so-called vaccine. And everybody's, yay, I want it. Give it to me right now. I was just looking at Iceland on social media. Everybody in Iceland is going to take the shot. It's a done deal. You're going to get it. And I'm glad I don't live there, because I like the idea of being able to say no. Say no. You're not touching my body. Go away. I have that right here in this country because we have a constitution, and that's the bottom line for me is we can't give up the Constitution. Don't suspend the Constitution, whatever you do. It'll never get better if you suspend the Constitution. Never. So, well, that's it for me. I've done my 2 rants for one night, and perhaps taken up too much time. But Professor, I want you to have the last word tonight, if you wouldn't mind. Tell us what you have to wrap us up with.
Well, you mentioned Iceland, and it was settled by what today is Denmark, Danes, right, and Vikings. And Viking, that means the people who pillage. That's the term. It's this term of disparaging. They call themselves Norsemen. They accept that, but they would not accept Vikings. But so and I'll end where I began, and that is that we must dismantle this insidious Danish toy, this Viking toy called the Lego. So let's deconstruct the Lego mentality, right, and recapture our humanistic reality. And I think we have a choice. Let's start in the play floor, in the toy chest, and dismantle Lego. This is the Rosetta Stone of the popular culture that's fostered the groupthink that's enslaved people. That's my insight for the week.
Well, George, I'll tell you, I have to add a little something, and that is that at National Harbor, up at the top of the hill there, where it's still blank, they still haven't built anything up at the top. Milt Peterson told me, and he's the boss of National Harbor and Peterson Companies, as we've investigated, he told me that there was going to be a Lego theme park there. They had almost closed the deal, and Lego was going to come and build a theme park there at part of National Harbor. So what more appropriate for us to end our show tonight by tying together Lego, National Harbor, where the home of Khashoggi 1, and all of that great research that George has done. So let's all spread the word. This is the moment in which everyone has to share. When you need to talk to your friends that aren't going to believe you, try to just be as gentle as you can and suggest, you say, now, I know this is going to be hard for you, but can you please just try to listen to me with an open mind and try to find some way to communicate with your friends, because it's by one person telling another person is the only way we're going to beat this.
Thank you, John.
All right.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, guys.
George.
Thanks, everybody in the chat. And I'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. and we'll have some more minefields for you at that time. All right. Good night, everybody. Good night, George.
Night.
Good night, Daryl.
Bye-bye.